Good morning and thank you so much for coming. I was quick and delighted to accept the invitation to address you this morning, but I stand before you in awe, like the Shaliach Tzibur of Rosh Hashanah. Hineni ha'ani mima'as, nirash v'nifchad mipachad, yoshev tehilot Yisrael. Hineni, I stand here, inadequate, perturbed, and in awe of God above and you, those who bear so many of the praises of Israel, of our existence as a Jewish people. I beg that you accept my words as if I were qualified, as if my voice was pleasant, and as if you already knew me as someone worthy of your respect, your attention, and your trust. I am in awe of this congregation and of my task to address this tragic anniversary, the darkest, saddest day, a pogrom in our safest haven, in the very sanctuary that promised us, reassured us that what you had witnessed, experienced, and lived through should never happen again. So let me begin by thanking you for what you have given and inspired in me. Famously, Rabbi Simcha Bunim of Pshishka taught that everyone should carry in his or her pocket 2 slips of paper, one proclaiming, I am but dust and ashes, Anochi afar ve'efer, and the other read, Bishvili nivra ha'olam, for my sake the whole world was created. The survivors that I have met lived in a world where in a flash their lives could be reduced to dust and ashes. And they lived with that stark apprehension even as they looked into the eyes of Joseph Mengele, Yamach Shemo, and yet, in their living, they have become the testimony of survival and have rebuilt a world. Survivors have taught me to take nothing, no security, for granted. It is through survivors that I know of the last moments of many of my family. It is through survivors that I've come to know the fates of villages and communities which were eradicated. It is through survivors that I have learned many truths, and it is through survivors that I have learned valuable lessons about faith, about intolerance, and to commit to a life of actions that ensure a more just and more compassionate world. My world exists because of you. My Jewish identity is framed around your testimony of resilience and of frailty. I cannot speak for others or the world outside my Daled Amot, but for myself, I thank you. Of all the blessings I could have wished for you, none eclipses the slogan, never again. Nachas from children and grandchildren, for sure. Health and peace of mind, certainly. Never worrying about the next meal, no need to queue for bread, 100%. These are blessings I would bestow on all humanity. But to you, especially, that never again should you witness a pogrom against our people. I know that October the 7th and the year that has followed has triggered the most terrible memories and apprehensions of brutality, dark tunnels, of capture, and of life in fear. And I know also that it has stirred up bewilderment that anything like this could ever recur. Of all the events that was not to be, of all the events that anyone should never see. I'm so sorry that I cannot spare you bewilderment, anxiety, and pain. In 1998, I was a rabbi in Auckland, New Zealand. That year, the Auckland Museum brought over a special travelling exhibition, the Precious Legacy exhibit from Prague. The exhibit, many of you will have seen it, comprised some hundreds of pieces of Jewish memorabilia spanning around 4 centuries. Each had been confiscated by the Nazis, meticulously collated and documented, just as the owners of these artifacts were collated, documented, and deported to extermination. Both the collecting and the deporting were projects of that most evil of Nazi henchmen, Reinhard Heydrich. Heydrich had been one of the instigators of the Kristallnacht, chaired the Wannsee Conference, was responsible for the transfer of Jews from Germany to Poland, director of the Einsatzgruppen, deputy protector of Bohemia and Moravia. It was said that he was creating a museum to the destroyed race. As the museum staff in Auckland readied themselves to display the treasures, they called on me as the local Jewish expert to help them write some of the captions, an assignment I readily embraced. Beautiful silver Torah crowns, faded Torah scrolls, Havdalah sets and Chanukiahs, some shined to magnificence, some quite humble and in wood. There were artworks, ketubas, bris milah kits, every token of Jewish life. There were shofars, and I blew one for the museum staff, hoping, foolishly, fantastically, that perhaps this shofar had in its day been pressed to the lips of the great Maharal of Prague, whose legends and writings I so revere. It was serendipity that the opening of the Precious Legacy exhibition in Auckland was on the day after Tisha B'Av. Through my new museum collections, I managed to arrange a showing like no other. On Erev Tisha B'Av, we were given special access. The Jewish community read Megillat Echa and Kinot, sitting by torchlight on the floor of the museum, surrounded by these treasures of a vanquished Jewish community. New Zealand was one of the most popular post-Shoah refuges for survivors. Joining me in the room were several survivors, their children and grandchildren. Some came from Czechoslovakia, and they were possibly looking through the glass in wonder at arts and trinkets that had once adorned their own family homes. Some certainly had been in the camp at Terezin, just a short drive from Heydrich's Prague headquarters. As we sat in the floor in the museum, chanting the Megillah written by the prophet Jeremiah, Al Eila ani bochia, Eini yorda mayim, ki rachak mimeni, menachem mashiv nafshi, hayu v'nai shomemim ki gava oyev. For these things do I weep. My eyes flow with tears. Far from me is any comforter who might revive my spirit. My children are forlorn, for the foe has prevailed. Betulatai uvachorai halchu vashevi. My maidens and my youths have gone into captivity. As we sat on the floor chanting the Megillah, we remembered the destruction of King Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. And those who lamented by the rivers of Babylon mourned the loss of everything we had left Egypt under Moses to establish. Their world could never be the same. The world could never be the same. And yet, with the fidelity of a few, just 70 years on, work began on the Second Temple. And this Second Temple too was destroyed, and we mourned on Tisha B'Av, the beginning of 2 millennia of diaspora, after Titus sacked Jerusalem, after Hadrian vanquished Bar Kokhba in a bloodbath. With Jews expelled from Jerusalem, we wondered as a people. The world convinced itself that we were destined to wander, never to find security, never to find a home. The Jews who came to live in Prague had their golden ages and had their pogroms. The famous story of the Maharal making a golem in the attic of the Altneuschule to protect the Jewish people reminds us that B'chol dor vador, in every generation, we have confronted hateful adversity. And so on Tisha B'Av in Auckland, I sat on the floor of the museum, remembering 2 destroyed temples and 2 millennia of persecution. I was accompanied by people who were survivors and by objects which were also survivors of our most recent and darkest times. It was a profoundly moving experience. Despite the date and the setting, it came with a joyous appreciation. Despite all suffering and despite every false prediction that our end was in sight, we are, as a people, survivors. Whatever Hashem's designs for us as a people, our spirit is unbreakable. We can, and we will, and we do prevail. A world that believes it can eradicate us has not yet learnt the lesson that the people of Israel are stronger than any adversary. But we have learnt that lesson. A world that believes that our spirit can be vanquished when our children are taken captive does not understand that we do not give up on our captives. We will not give up on our right to exist. We will not give up on our hopes nor our dreams. We will never give up on our destiny. The world may not have learnt that lesson, but we have learnt that lesson, and it fills me with hope. I have learnt the lesson, and you, the survivors, have been my teachers. Your stories, your testimonies, your presence give me a confidence that just as we have emerged from the darkness of yesteryear, we can emerge from the darkness of yesterday. Certainly, the optimism of my rhetoric should not be imbibed without caution. Sometimes it feels not just that we are locked in an ever-repeating historical loop, but worse, we've tumbled down the rabbit hole into a looking-glass world where everything works contrariwise to sense. In the early 20th century, anti-Semitism was justified through science. Genocide was conceived by the most educated and refined of civilized nations. And today, a United Nations and the courts established to prevent genocidal slaughter are complicit in the new anti-Semitism. We are agog at self-defined liberals in Europe who endorse the agenda of totalitarian regimes and the religious fundamentalists who would see them hang if they spoke up or made lives for themselves in Iran. We are dumbfounded by the news organizations and journalists who sacrifice all integrity as they vilify Israel and deny it defense on the ground, on the radio, on television, and in print. Time and again, the threats that Israel faces and the heroic measures taken to protect its citizens and minimize the risk to innocent civilians all over are given scant coverage. The media inflames and then calls on Israel to de-escalate. The Nazis made the Jews pay for and clean up after the Reichspogrom of Kristallnacht. Following even the mainstream news today, one might think that Israel was to blame for October 7th, that the victims and the hostages were not innocent, or that the 60,000 evacuees in northern Israel were inconsequential and should be overlooked by their government. in a turbulent world, we need strong and principled leaders. Men and women who understand that this is not a distant squabble over a tiny patch of land. Israel is holding the front line in the battle for democratic freedoms. It is a battle the West wants to win, but it is a battle we cannot afford to lose. My New Zealand congregant, Sol Filler, was a baker by profession. He had lost most of his family to Siberia and Auschwitz. He had hidden in the sewers of Krakow. He had stood before Mengele at Auschwitz. In the coal mines, he lost a toe under a rail wagon while ducking the rained blows of an officer's whip. He whipped me so hard, Sol told me, and I moved forward, and a railway wagon rolled over my toe, chopped it off. I kept working. I knew that's how I would stay alive. Hospital? No hospitals. You didn't survive in the hospitals. Sol and his remaining 9 toes made it through the infamous death march from Auschwitz in January 1945, where many thousands of starving concentration camp prisoners were forced to cross Europe on foot via Bergen-Belsen and Buchenwald to Theresienstadt. Only 200 made it. At the point of liberation, when Sol was the first out to the Russian tanks, he pleaded that the soldiers help the inmates. Miraculously, Sol had been liberated by a Yiddish-speaking Jewish tank officer. Starving, on liberation, Sol offered to bake bread for the soldiers and the survivors. When told that they could spare no Russian personnel to assist him, he suggested that they give him some German POWs to help. When asked how he could work side by side with his former captors, Sol answered, "Why not? They are starving too." And so, Sol ran the bakery for the liberated inmates and their former captors. The world could not have been more upside down. When the moment came, Sol Filler, tattoo number 108077, demonstrated pragmatism, demonstrated humanity, and a determination to build a way forwards in the face of and despite all destruction. What have our survivors done so remarkably? What can I thank you for demonstrating and for inspiring? Not just the will to live, but the energy to build. Not just to rebuild lost communities, but to build bigger and better. You've endowed our schools, resourced Jewish learning and Jewish innovation, Jewish technology. You've inspired unprecedented Jewish philanthropy and investment in the securing and sharing of Jewish values. You've contributed so much to the underpinning of a Jewish future here, across the diaspora, and in Israel. Our world seems to have turned upside down. October the 7th and the year that has followed has been jarring and traumatic. We've been alerted to many weaknesses and fault lines in Israel and the wider world. And this too is a lesson that I have learned from cherished survivors. When life turns upside down, Jewish ethical values prevail, and our pragmatism comes to the fore. When the fighting stops, we bake the bread and feed the hungry. We set the standards of humanity for a world to admire. Israel has sent search and rescue teams and set up field hospitals across the globe after several natural and human disasters. It leads relief and irrigation efforts in places of drought and famine. It pioneers programs in literacy and communication. Jews pay Jews play pivotal roles in many of the organizations which champion civil rights and equal opportunities. Survivors and their families have played no small part in these endeavors. In one pocket has always been the reminder that we are but dust, but the other offers hope and majesty. God created the world for our benefit. It is our world, and in the face of destruction, we shall build it and rebuild it. From the ashes of the temple, we rebuilt. Through the ashes of the Crusades, we rebuilt. From the pogroms of the Cossacks, we rebuilt. From the ashes of the Shoah, you rebuilt. From the ashes of October the 7th, from the Nova Festival, from Kibbutz Be'eri and all the other Yeshuvim ravaged by the evils of Hamas, we shall rebuild. May Hashem protect Israel, the IDF, and all institutions guarding the safety and welfare of our people. May his wisdom guide the hard decisions that they must make. May we see the citizens of the North return safely to their homes. Our Chayalim and Chayalot return safely to theirs. Above all, may the hostages be restored to their homes and their families to live lives and live their dreams in freedom. With your help and God's, we have emerged from the darknesses of yesteryear. We can and will emerge from the darkness of yesterday, of October the 7th, 2023. Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brother Rose.